So Generation 2000, G2K, the young professional affiliate of the Jamaica Labour Party, is disappointed by the decision of the opposition to vote against extending the state of public emergency. Joining us this morning is G2K President Ryan Strain, and he's going to be telling us just how they feel. Good morning, sir.
Morning to you, morning to the viewers. Thanks for having me.
Disappointment would suggest that probably you were expecting a different result?
I think it was a situation where we hoped for the best, but were prepared for the worst. And I think that would have been the responsible posture in light of history. And I mean, we have to remember this has been going on for 3 years, a matter of the comments in our SOEs and the curtailing of them and the resuming, etc. So why not 3 years continuous? I think the possibility was always there that it could have been discontinued, but one would have hoped that good sense would have prevailed.
But has the discussion been consistently that the opposition at times has said, we don't think that this is the best approach? Like some people, I feel like some people thought, oh, we were caught off guard, but I don't know. I felt like the narrative was always, we think something else needs to happen. We don't think this is always going to be the best approach.
Yes. Well, I think the opposition's view has been clear over time. What's more telling to me, however, and to the organization is that the security forces, in their wisdom and obviously having access to information that the average person would have made a recommendation, and also the citizens as well. And we also would have seen the numbers themselves bear it out as also being warranted. So on those 3 counts, yes, there's that school of thought that we can't ignore at all. But I think between the numbers and the call and the recommendation of the security forces, who are, of course, non-political and just operate in the best interest of the society.
Well, you did have members that would have been of the force who were decrying the long hours and some of the conditions under which they had to work. The opposition leader, Ryan, saying that, long-term use of this anti-crime measure is ineffective and unconstitutional. G2K saying this vote against the SOEs brings to mind, quote, the kind of tribal politics that former PNP President Dr. Phillips lambasted this past week. And you went ahead further to say it's reprehensible. For those who are arguing that it is ineffective and it has been unconstitutional, what is the G2K saying or the party saying with regard to that? How do you address that to say, no, this is actually working? You spoke to the numbers. What are the other, bits of evidence that we have that they are actually working?
Well, I mean, we have 2 kinds of evidence. There is I guess we'll call empirical, and there's the anecdote. So empirical, we'd have seen the falling numbers of murders. We'd have seen the relative sense of peace and calm. So empirical is obviously the numbers. On the anecdotal side, we'd have heard members of the respective areas saying that, it's the first time, there have been old ladies, older men who said that it's the first time they've been able to go outside and play dominoes, etc., without worrying about a young man going outside or just, walking around armed militias walking around the neighborhood intimidating everyone. And that's been consistent since 2018, I believe. So when we think of the numbers, it goes beyond question. I think the numbers really don't lie. But on the other side, when we see the relief that many persons would have experienced as a result. Now, I do not say that to ignore the challenges that members of the security forces have spoken of with the longer hours. And I think that should be addressed. We're not trying to sweep that under the rug at all. But speaking for G2K, we do think that we do side with the security forces who would have recommended it. We do side with the citizens of the respective communities who would have wanted it as well. And we do side with the other non-partisan, non-aligned organizations that have warranted it. And the reason why we said or inquired as to whether this is political, which we believe it is that there's been no other group thus far that we have heard from. The PNP has effectively said, we disagree with PSOJ, CIMA, the citizens, security forces, and are going to go against them for reasons best known to them.
So
But I'm
go
sorry,
ahead,
Simone.
Har.
What I'm not hearing though, Ryan, is there is a concern, and I don't think it's just an opposition concern. I mean, I've seen it, being voiced about constitution, about human rights, about the idea that we can just detain people, and that comes from citizens in the SOE areas as well. So for me, that's the gap that I'm not hearing fixed. What is your response to that? That yes, we're trying to fight crime, but we also have to balance human rights. So what is the fix? What is the fix from your perspective?
Well, I think the unfortunate circumstance of indefinite detention, if that's the term, because I'm not exactly familiar with the specifics of the term, there's two sides to it, but obviously I would not be in favor of persons just being detained indefinitely. I think that would be something that we would be interested in seeing in terms of if it could be shortened or there could be some, some less, the word eludes me, but to bring some measure of definition around the time for detention. And I do think that does warrant addressing. However, at the same time, we wouldn't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. But we'll never deny that is an undesirable element of the SOEs as of right now. I mean, yes, there's anecdotes as well regarding some of who are detained, and times past we've had person detained and then gone out and committed crimes, etc. But all being said, there is still that measure of human rights, which I think should be taken into consideration, and that is an imperfection within it. But it's also an emergency measure as well. So it's a bit of that. I think it's a balance in that respect. But I mean, we're not ignoring that element either.
Sorry, Simone, but Brian, I know, and forgive me because it's something that I'm trying to figure out myself. So that's the thing, because in an emergency, there are some undesirable things that we may or may not say, okay, because it's short term, we may have to live with this. But I feel because the SOEs, as you have agreed, have been, 3 years? Then it's no longer short term. I feel like once you pass a year or a couple of months, you've gone into medium and long. So my concern is, since it's become medium and long and we've seen the human rights issues, why not fix them over a 3-year period? Why go into now a 4th year with that very undesirable element?
Well, it hasn't been 3 years unbroken. So I think the only thing I could say in response to that is perhaps that could be put to the legislators. But what has been definitely the case, it would have started 3 years ago. I think one of the things that's in this space, which doesn't represent the truth, is that, sometimes it's made to seem as though it's 36 months unbroken. That's not the case. And it hasn't necessarily just been one area either. Why that is not yet addressed, I am not particularly sure. I think that would, but then, I mean, in a matter of an emergency, I suppose one could say, well, does time allow? But there has been ample time, so I think that could be addressed. Now, the process by which it gets there, I'm not sure of. But I think, however, that sometimes when you're in a circumstance of an emergency that does warrant this immediate action, and there's a series of priorities that dominate the time of the upper house and the lower house in the houses of parliament, then I can see how it could be tricky. But I think my understanding is that there is some adjustments coming. So I think the new year should be interesting.
I want to ask you a question. You spoke to the PSOJ and the other groups who have come out in support of the extension, and you say the opposition has chosen to ignore them, quote, for reasons best known to them. Your group is suggesting, actually you said, that this leads us to conclude that they are voting along political lines and displaying wanton disregard for the life and safety of Jamaican citizens. Do you really believe that? Do you believe the opposition is not vested in the life and safety of Jamaican citizens? Obviously, you can't imbue motive, but why do you think, when you say for reasons best known to them, why do you think they would oppose if they genuinely did not feel that this was a good move for Jamaica?
That's a great question. It's very difficult for me to speak on behalf of the opposition or to even imagine the thought process that went into it. But the couple of things that gave me pause was immediately after the votes were cast, or the 3 votes were cast in the Senate. I believe that was the number. There was a plastering of images on social media around why this vote was not, why X person didn't vote, why Y person didn't vote, why whomever who wasn't in the country didn't vote, etc., etc. And I think that led many of us to believe that there was some. It was almost felt like it was a bit of theatrics, and it just did not feel at the time that it matched the seriousness of the debate that was ongoing in the Senate and in the Parliament right before that, in the lower house right before that, and that gave us great pause. It also seemed that, yes, of course, it struck us as political. And again, I said, if you have vested groups, you have groups who would be in possession of some information. You have the PSOJ, and if we think about it as well, you would have members of the PSOJ who have employees, who are managers, who sometimes even business owners who live in the vicinity of some of these areas or in the parishes themselves. And they're still saying that they would have supported it. I mean, General Secretary of mine lives in Western Jamaica and was in support of it. And there's inconveniences, there's no denying that. We know the long checkpoint lines, etc. But this struck us as a patently political vote, and it's borne itself, but it struck us as coordinated. And it's been consistent with history, not just 3 years, but going back 11 years. And I mean, we're yet to be convinced otherwise. Do we think that the opposition cares about the lives of Jamaicans? I mean, they may say they do, but I think there's a measure that could have been effective in curtailing criminality. Now, if it's a case where this is going for a year unbroken, then I suppose we could have a different conversation. But I'm a stockbroker. If I say to my client, listen, we recommend this, and they go against it, then, I'd be a little uncomfortable with that, much less if I was a security professional.
Yeah, but if I'm buying stocks and I say I go against it, Ryan, I might be cautious. It doesn't mean I hate the stock or I don't like the stock.
Or your risk appetite is a little lower.
My risk appetite might be a little low. And I'm hearing it, but also what I'm getting from social media and generally from the public is that they feel both sides are making political. You're saying the decision was political. The people are saying everything you do is political, and that at this point in time, they're calling on the leaders of the nation to show us that as party in power and as opposition, you can collectively address this crime issue. How are we going to do this?
Well, I think that they would require the players to come to the table. I think that's that's been visited previously. As far as it would concern, as you know, G2K is an affiliate of the party, and we're obviously very close to the party. But when we do speak, we do speak from our perspective. Nobody, and this is just we're not implying any motives or anything. I'm just clarifying that.
Okay.
When we do speak, it's from a position that we hold. We were not sent in any way to write about this. It was something we felt very strongly about, and the party didn't even know the missive was coming. So this is a position that we are convicted about. As I said, though, I think there's lip service sometimes given to the coming together, and I don't want to veer down a political road at all.
Right.
I'll just say, generally speaking, that I think if it's effective, if it's efficacious, then by all means. But for me, it's very, very difficult when I've seen a position put forward, which is what led us to write about it, with a position put forward, which has, and it's rare sometimes you have private sector and security forces agreeing, and then you have an oversight committee on crime agreeing as well. It's rare you have that kind of support for a measure, right? And bearing in mind it's a winter tourist season, so we know the obvious risk that could come with the perception of a community or a parish or a cluster of parishes being under an SOE, and despite that, wanting it, that spoke very strongly, as far as the belief of the way forward. So, yes, I mean, crime has been with us for a long time, 40 plus years.
Yeah.
Genesis of it and whatever, it is what it is. Mm-hmm. And we'd all love a safer Jamaica. But I think where we are right now, we have to take short-term measures, combined with longer term measures like investments, et cetera. And hopefully in 10 years, we do see significant shifts.
All right, so G2K Prezi, thank you very much. Ryan Strawn for talking to us this morning. And certainly the debate will continue for a while.
Yes.
But from your lips to God's ears, that we find something that can do something, because something I should do before something doing. Coming up next, what are your thoughts on the opposition voting against